Good morning. Happy Easter Monday. I hope you all had a great Easter weekend. Just as you're reflecting on this weekend, I'm sure it looked really different than you had expected or planned. It certainly did for us. But the story of Jesus is still so true and so powerful. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts on it with you this morning. I've been reading through the Jesus Storybook Bible with my kids. It's great not just for kids. I love it for myself as well. And so I just thought I'd read a little piece of this for you guys today and just kind of reflect a few things on it. And this is called The Dark Night in the Garden. And so we're looking at the moment where Jesus is, he knows he's about to be arrested, unjustly accused, that he's going to suffer and die for our sakes. And so he needs some strength and he needs to spend some time with his Father. And I don't want to compare our suffering with Jesus' suffering because it pales so drastically in comparison. But I think we can all relate in a minuscule way that we all have disappointments and struggles and suffering. And even in this really weird season where we're all kind of stuck at home and isolated from each other, there's suffering involved in it. And so it's natural to ask, like, God, where are you in this? And what's going on? And are you still good? And can I still trust you? Are you still weaving together something beautiful in this story? Because right now it feels not great. And so Jesus is in a very difficult, dark place right here. And he goes to his Father. And so, he needed some time with his Father before he could go ahead into the suffering that he knew was right ahead of him. He knew it was time for him to die. They had planned it long ago, he and his Father. Jesus was going to take the punishment for all the wrong things anybody had ever done or ever would do. "Papa, Father," Jesus cried, and he fell to the ground. "Is there any other way to get your children back, to heal their hearts, to get rid of the poison?" But Jesus knew there was no other way. All the poison of sin was going to have to go into his own heart. God was going to pour into Jesus' heart all the sadness and brokenness in people's hearts. He was going to pour into Jesus' body all the sickness in people's bodies. God was going to have to blame his Son for everything that had gone wrong. It would crush Jesus. But there was something else. Something even more horrible. When people ran away from God, they lost God. It was what happened when they ran away. Not being close to God was like a punishment. Jesus was going to take that punishment. Jesus knew what that meant. He was going to lose his Father, and that, Jesus knew, would break his heart in two. Violent sobs shook Jesus' whole body. Then Jesus was quiet, like a lamb. "I trust you, Papa," he said. "Whatever you say, I will do." Wow, that deep obedience, stepping into suffering, unjust suffering for our sake. And we've just celebrated that this Easter. We're so grateful that Jesus stepped into that, knew he was going to die, and not just be dead, but like a really painful, agonizing death. And that death, he also bore the weight of all of our sin, all of the wrongs that anyone has ever done, and that separation from his Father. And that's so weighty, and we can't fully imagine and grasp how difficult that was. And yet in Hebrews 12 verse 2, it says that for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. And I love that he was able to look beyond that suffering, that he and his Father had made this plan so long before, that he could look past the suffering. He could look past the horrificness of what he was about to go through, and he could set his eyes on this joy, this future joy of being restored to his Father, and of us all being able to be restored to relationship with God. It's such an incredible gift that he chose to suffer for our sakes, that he didn't deserve it. And so for us, our suffering isn't going to be on the same scale as his, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And can we look past that momentary suffering, and can we ask God, like, what do you have for me in this? Maybe I don't see the joy ahead. Maybe I don't see like exactly what you've got planned ahead for me. But can I still trust that you're good, and trust that you have a plan that's unfolding, that's for my good and for your glory? God proves himself over and over again to be faithful. And so a great question for us to ask is, God, how can I continue on in my faith, even in the midst of these uncertainties? How do I continue to trust you? How do I fix my eyes on you? What does that even mean and look like in these days when I don't get outside of my house very much? I only see my family. How do I continue to trust you in this? And so in scripture, there are lots of conversations that happen about suffering in the Bible. I'm going to look at just a couple verses with you. In their original context, it's talking about suffering for your faith and being persecuted. But I think the truths that we find in them can apply to other kinds of suffering as well. And so it's from 2 Corinthians 4. It's a great chapter. There's lots of good stuff in it. I'm just going to be focusing on verses 16 to 18 right now, though. It says, therefore we do not lose heart. I love that. Don't lose heart. Things are weird and different and maybe challenging or scary right now, but don't lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. That is what God can be doing for us right now. He can be renewing us inwardly. He can be doing works within us that don't match up to what's going on outside, and what a beautiful gift that is, that he's continuing to work in us. It says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. We are in some momentary troubles. It's true. Life looks different right now than we imagined it ever would be. And yet there's more beyond COVID-19. There's more beyond this. What does God want to be teaching us now? What lessons do we need to be learning now that change us for the better when we come out on the other side of this? Who do we want to be? What do we want our relationship with God to look like? What do we want our relationships with our family to look like, and our friends? What things do we need to reprioritize in our lives? How can we allow this momentary suffering, these momentary setbacks, this momentary isolation, being stuck and feeling alone, what lessons can we learn, and what can we fix our eyes on Jesus to see? That he endured so much worse for the joy of knowing that we would be restored to him. So why don't we say yes to that invitation and say, yeah, I want to be restored to you. I want to be able to trust in God the way that Jesus did, because he is faithful and he is true and he is good. And just one final thought as I leave you here today. In John 14, Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Another version says, you trust in God, trust also in me. So as Jesus himself endured pain and suffering to a scale that we can't even comprehend, we can trust in God. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Know that Jesus is for you, that he loves you, and that he will give us strength to endure. And we can look to him, put our trust in him and faith in him, and he is going to provide for our needs, for the strength that we need to get through this season. God bless you.